All right, here's MSNBC's response to Donald Trump's speech.
That's Donald Trump finishing what turned out to be about a 35-minute speech. It was billed as a speech about the subject of law and order. That was the campaign's definition of what the speech would be about. It appeared to have about 8 minutes of material focused in some sense on law and order, and then it went back to a Trump campaign speech, stump speech elements that we've heard many times: immigration, trade policy, education policy. He got into the teacher tenure in a speech that was supposed to be about law and order. We're joined now by Mark Thompson. He's the host of Make It Plain, which airs on Sirius XM. He's with us here along with Charlie Sykes, Rick Wilson, and E.J. Dionne. And Mark, one of the things Donald Trump concentrated on repeatedly was the African-American vote, saying that, in effect, African-Americans have been duped for more than 60 years now in voting for Democrats. And the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll of African-American voters shows that Donald Trump is beating Gary Johnson by 1 point. Gary Johnson has 0 support in the poll of African-American voters. Donald Trump has 1%. Hillary Clinton has 86%. Jill Stein has 4%. What was your reaction to what he was saying there about how the Democratic Party has duped African-Americans into voting for him?
Thanks as always, first of all, for having me on, Lawrence. If I had not seen it, if you had just asked me, what did he say, I could have told you this is what he said. That is the cliche of cliches. Republicans have been saying that for 60 years, that African Americans have been duped and one-sided. But the Republican Party has done very little to appeal to African Americans. And then for Trump himself to say that in front of a majority white audience. Now, if he was concerned about African Americans, why wouldn't he go into Milwaukee and try to show some concern for the people who were there? Instead, he goes to an all-white audience in West Bend. He talks about...
It's about an hour away from Milwaukee.
Yeah, so it's close enough. He could have gone.
Yeah.
He goes to West Bend, and he refers to African Americans as looters. He makes that generalization and still tries to ask for our vote at the same time. Hillary Clinton has 86% of the African American vote because we know Trump. We have history with him from his discrimination, which was cited by the Department of Justice, by his calls and his attacks on the Central Park Five. He is running a racist campaign. And quite frankly, it's probably high time that we have a reasonable suspicion that Donald Trump is a racist himself. This, after all, is the man who questioned President Obama's citizenship. And not only has he attacked African Americans, he's attacked other groups as well, the Khan family, Latinos, Jews. So it's really incredible. If he were concerned about African Americans, he would have gone to Milwaukee, and he would have accepted the invitation of the NAACP to come and speak at their convention, as all presidential candidates traditionally do.
E.J. Dionne, he couldn't bring himself to tell the truth about where he was. He said repeatedly in this speech, right here in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I was really struck by exactly the same thing. West Bend is a town that is 1% African American, and yet here he is giving this pitch, at least in theory, this pitch for the African American vote. It's interesting, there was a piece in the New York Times, I think yesterday, where a Republican consultant who had done outreach for Republicans to the African Americans said, you have to do the bare minimum, and he's not even doing that, Donald Trump. And so I guess that's what he thought he was doing, but he probably was doing something else, which is he was giving a classic pro-police law and order pitch, often compared to Richard Nixon, very much a Roger Ailes kind of pitch. And by casting it in terms that it's appealing to the African American vote, he's trying to protect himself from charges saying he's really appealing to a backlash vote. So he's either trying to double that 1% he's got in the polls, or he's using this as cover.
Rick Wilson, he couldn't bring himself to refer to what's coming up as a presidential election. What he called for, and I haven't heard this in Republican boilerplate before, what he called for was, quote, peaceful regime change.
You know, he has a great affinity for dictators and a great affinity for authoritarians. And I think people ought to look at that as a red flag and how he looks at this election, because he's trying to rev his people up, saying the election's going to be rigged and stolen. He wants to make this predicate about the evil establishment that's all out to get him. And he's trying to get his folks in a frame of mind where they look at this thing as something that's been stolen from them, and he wants them out on the streets, you know, doing the same kinds of things that he's decrying tonight. And look, he's a guy who's divided the country from the very beginning of this campaign, and that's no different. Starting to call this regime change, it's delegitimizing the democratic process that we're engaged in right now. And that's classic Trump. He doesn't have an affinity for the Constitution or for the Republic or for the democratic process in any way. He would love to be crowned. He would love to have the crown set on his head on a throne in Washington, because that's how he sees himself.
Charlie Sykes, your reaction to the speech and how it will play out there in your state of Wisconsin?
I may have a slightly different perspective because I'm right here. My wife's family is from West Bend. I spent a lot of time there. I'm in Milwaukee right now. And it is obviously interesting that he would give that speech up in West Bend. You know, look, let's give him a little bit of credit that somebody wrote him a speech that had some outreach to the African-American community, and you ought to give him some credit for that. However, having said that, I'm guessing that African-Americans in Milwaukee are going to be looking at that speech and asking the question, why did you give that in West Bend, which is a great town, but it is 1% white, 1% African-American? And secondly, where's the substance? There was some things in that speech that was a sound critique of problems in Milwaukee, and I kept waiting for, was there an idea, was there a solution, was there a proposal, anything? In fact, you know, when he started that 8 minutes on law and order, given what's happened here in Milwaukee, my reaction was, that's going to play well with the southeastern Wisconsin conservative base. He was hitting all the right notes. Somebody had prepped him well. Somebody had given him some information. And I was waiting for and therefore I'm going to do what? And there was nothing. So he scored some points, I think, here in southeastern Wisconsin, you know, with the conservative base. But in terms of the African-American vote, I mean, the fact that he's sort of reading this, he's going through the motions, people have been paying attention, they've been watching. Voters in Wisconsin are very, very savvy, and I think they're going to look away and they're going to say, what we got was some rhetoric, some words, but nothing much behind those words.
Well, when you watch a speech like this with Rick Wilson,
Yeah, so I pretty much, you know, we are pretty much in agreement that there wasn't any substance, there wasn't anything for the African-American community to hang its hat on that maybe they should try to give him a chance. I mean, he pointed out things, but then again, and that's what everybody's looking for, it's solutions. And he just doesn't have any, and if he does, he's not verbalizing them.
He was making that argument in West Bend. Now that is significant here because it was billed as this certain type of speech. An interesting choice, to be clear, for a speech that was directly bringing up race. One political reporter already pointed this out online. According to the Census Bureau, West Bend, Wisconsin is 95% white, less than 1% African American. I want to get right to our panel. We have a good one here. SiriusXM host Mark Thompson, former deputy campaign manager for the Martin O'Malley campaign, Liz Smith, CBS Sunday Morning contributor Nancy Giles, and joining us from Washington, D.C., former deputy campaign manager for Mitt Romney and a contributor here for us, Katie Packer. Thank you to everyone. Mark, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on this address. I know you watched the entire thing for us here in the newsroom, and particularly on the geography. At times, Trump directly made it sound to a television or to an audience at a distance that he was addressing the inner city, that he was addressing black voters. Yeah. There's a big difference between West Bend and Milwaukee. You don't even get away with saying you're in Harlem if you're on the Upper West Side around here, and that's a lot less than 40 miles.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you for having me, all right. West Bend is an hour from Milwaukee. If he was concerned about the African-American community, he should have gone into the African-American community and heard some of the concerns about what was going on. It sounded as if Sheriff David Clark wrote his speech, because he was saying, he's been saying all that kind of stuff for the past 24 hours on Hannity and Fox Business and elsewhere. Same old cliches. If I was not here to watch the speech and you asked me what he said, I could have told you, Ari, because it's the same cliche we've always heard. The Democratic Party takes African African Americans for granted. The Democratic Party hasn't done anything for African Americans. But what, in fact, has Trump or the Republican Party done? To use the term looters as a generalization, to talk about hating the police, to call people in general violent, that's not speaking out to African Americans. And he had a chance to do that. I was in Cincinnati. He was invited to come speak at the NAACP convention, also in close proximity
he won't go.
to Cleveland, and he won't go.
He's not interested. And just on a personal level, my feelings are hurt. You know, I mean, this is a guy whose wealth was built on his father's discriminatory rental practices.
That's right.
Has he ever even maybe made a building with housing for working people, you know, with affordable housing? Has he done anything on that level to help improve lives? Because that's part of what goes on in communities where there are these kind of incidents with police and there's poverty. It's not just police hating and drugs and all the ways he just lumped African Americans together and just painted this like chocolate city version of hell. I mean, it's
Right.
like,
And you raise an important point, both of you, which is he speaking to African American voters in theory, because not obviously in practice based on the data in the region there, or is he talking about African American voters to appeal to different voters, which is a political question for you, Liz. I want to play him discussing that in the context of saying that Hillary Clinton picks the wrong sides in these battles. Take a listen.
My opponent, Hillary, would rather protect the offender than the victim. Big problem in our society. Hillary Clinton-backed policies are responsible for the problems in the inner cities today, and a vote for her is a vote for another generation of poverty, high crime, and lost opportunities. I care too much about my country to let this happen.
That kind of rhetoric, we know, is fairly effective in a small voter turnout Republican primary.
Right.
Because it is gospel that Hillary Clinton is to blame for a whole host of things. With this as a general election strategy, looking to you as someone who's run Democratic campaigns, does this work the same way to a general election audience?
No, I don't think it does. And what I think that rhetoric showed actually is that, look, I would love to see Donald Trump go and speak directly to the black community. I don't think he ever will. And his rhetoric tonight made me very glad that he didn't go to the city of Milwaukee, which is facing a lot, which is
Serious
sort of a microcosm for a lot of the unrest we're facing. And the last thing that we need is having him go out there and stoke these divisions and say that somehow Democrats are anti-law enforcement and somehow pit communities of color against the law enforcement community. What we need are voices of calm, voices like President Obama's, and President Obama is out there saying, you know what, Black Lives Matter. We also need to respect law enforcement and the hard job they have to do. And we have to figure out ways to reform policing to bring our communities together.
Right.
And you know what? Donald Trump didn't talk about one reform he would make to improve policing. And you know, the Ferguson report came out with very comprehensive reforms that I think only 9 out of 17,000 police districts.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, no, I think you raise an important point. If you want to get into that, there's a rich discussion around policing.
Right.
Not all the issues are automatically ideological or partisan. He did say he wanted to support more officers.
More
police
officers,
are supported generally through state funding. So unless you want to do the COPS program, which may be awkward for him because it was started under President Clinton in 1994, you're not going to have necessarily a lot of federal funding. And if you do, that's still federal tax dollars, which the Republican Congress has been stingier with because they say leave that to the states.
Right.
Katie, I don't want to pile too many things up here, but I want to bring you in and throw one more piece of data at everyone because Donald Trump was saying he wants the votes of African Americans, so we checked that. We want to look at that possibility. Among African Americans in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, Hillary Clinton 91%, Donald Trump 1%. Katie.
Well, you know, this is a perfect example of a Donald Trump speech that is very light on policy and very heavy on bumper sticker slogans. You know, he had a great opportunity last week to go to my hometown of Detroit, Michigan, and have a very substantive conversation about the plight of the inner city in this country, and to look at things that are starting to work in a city like that. Without a doubt, there's a lot to criticize about Democrat policies and Democrat leaders who have failed the inner city and in a big way have failed the African American community. But Donald Trump speaking about it in bumper sticker slogans without actually offering substantive policy on what he's going to do to actually change, life for the African American community or for the inner city residents of this country, it just isn't the answer. And I don't think that the African American voters that he seemed to be trying to target are buying it.
I agree. I don't think that he's making any appeal. He definitely didn't make an appeal tonight, and it was a little bit schizophrenic and paradoxical to be in that environment, to talk about assaults on police, to talk about crime and blame it all on the Democratic Party and the African American community and Hillary Clinton and everybody, and then to say, I want the African American vote.
Coming from where? Based on what? I know, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Like, he's shown absolutely no evidence at all at even being interested. It's bizarre. It was really almost like watching a drunk phone call. That's what it's like when you see him. Sometimes even when he's on the teleprompter and it's a little more constructed, it's like a drunk call.
Well, and Liz, on the politics of it, they did want to say this was a big special address. Aides told our own Ali Vitale from the Trump campaign, he's going on prompter, which is their way of saying he's got something to say. But this was really a stump speech, just sprinkled with a little extra Law and Order bromide.
Totally agree. And it was like a really bad copy and paste job of all his previous prompter speeches.
Which is better than plagiarizing other people's.
Right, so that is good.
I want to be fair. I want to be fair.
No, you're being fair. You're being fair.
But going back to Katie's point, and your point about policies is, let's look at Donald Trump's policies and let's look at how they would help the African American community. You know what his economic policies are? Giving huge tax breaks to corporations and millionaires and billionaires via repealing the estate tax. You know what? You know what he feels about voter ID? He supports voter ID, voter suppression efforts that are aimed primarily at suppressing black vote. And those are
I'm no defender of Donald Trump, but to say that he supports suppressing the black vote, I think is a little bit of overreach and is sort of Dem talking points. The Republican Party does support voter identification. That's not the same as
yes, it is. It's synonymous with
the
suppression
Supreme Court would disagree with you. The Supreme Court has just thrown out a lot of the Republicans' voting ID ideas.
That doesn't make it suppression.
It does.
It's a modern day poll tax.
Yes, it is. And it's meant to suppress the votes of black voters, of Latino voters, of poor student voters, women voters, women who change their names.
The elderly.
Yeah. And so you can go down the list and you can call it voter ID, but let's be real, it is a voter suppression tactic.
Let me give Katie a chance to respond, and let me also ask you, Katie, what else would you want to hear from the rest of the Republican Party? Because I'm old enough to remember a time 3 to 4 weeks ago, would give a speech and there would be some attempt to respond or echo it. We see that a lot in politics. We see it a lot in what they call surrogates, which is people come out and echo it. And I don't know if it's just me. Lately, it seems like he did the foreign policy national security speech yesterday that was supposed to be a big thing. He did this tonight, and we're not hearing from any Republicans other than his inner buddy circle of Chris Christie and Rudy. We're not hearing from anyone in Congress or anyone else any echo. Is that right?
Well, I think people are just tired. They're tired of having to go out and defend what sounds like nonsense half the time, and I don't blame them. I mean, that's why I don't support Donald Trump, so I don't have to go out and defend him.
I'm tired, Katie. We got 45 minutes left in this live show. Okay, keep going.
But if you want to look at somebody that's actually got substantive policy that they're proposing, real things that he's proposing that would be done for the inner cities of this country, Paul Ryan has a great agenda. I would be happy to see Donald Trump plagiarize some of the things that Paul Ryan has said that would really make a difference in our communities. But like I said, I don't think Donald Trump is very serious about proposing real substantive policy change. He just wants to to sputter these bumper sticker slogans that don't have any substance behind them.
And that itself may say something about the state of the race when your best hope is that Paul Ryan could potentially sock puppet Donald Trump at some later date. The whole panel stays, and we got more to talk about, so stay with me, everybody. Ahead, we do have a little bit more.
All right, so that's enough of MSNBC. I'm going to see if I can, if I've saved anything from Fox or CNN.